This happened about 2 months ago. I'm 32, and I've been a janitor at the local hospital for almost 5 years. I took the night shifts after my dad got sick. My family needed the extra money. I thought I could handle it. I knew the hospital well. Walking those dim corridors was just part of the job. But something changed. Maybe it was the quiet. Maybe the shadows stretched a little longer at night. I still can't get it out of my head. On my third night shift, I was mopping the floor near the emergency room when I heard soft footsteps. They echoed off the walls, fading as quickly as they came. I paused, listening carefully. Maybe it was another employee, but when I turned the corner, the hallway was empty. Just silence. I felt uneasy. My heart began to race, but I shrugged it off. It was late, and I was tired. I finished my shift, pushing the feeling aside. The next week, the footsteps returned. This time, they sounded closer. The lights above flickered as I walked, making the shadows dance in a creepy way. I froze, staring at the flickering light. It felt like I had someone watching me. I didn't say anything to anyone who would believe me. I figured it was just my imagination. But then things started to get stranger. I found medical equipment moved around in rooms. One night, I walked into a supply closet to grab cleaning supplies. It looked like the bandages were stacked perfectly, like someone had organized them recently. I was sure I left them in a mess. Then there were notes. Little slips of paper with messages, like "help me" or "get out." My skin crawled when I saw them. I thought about ripping them up, but instead, I shoved them into my pocket. Maybe I wanted proof. Maybe I thought no one would believe me. Things escalated. One night, while I mopped the floor on the 3rd floor, a door slammed down the hallway. I jumped and dropped the mop. My heart was pounding. I walked cautiously toward the sound, but I found nothing. Empty rooms lined the corridor. I felt cold, like something was very wrong. I knew this place well, and it was always quiet. I felt a shiver run down my spine. Then it happened. I heard a whisper, soft as a breath. "Josh," it said. My stomach dropped. I could only stand there. I looked around, but I was alone. Was it just the fatigue? Maybe. Maybe it was all in my head. I didn't stick around to find out. That night, I clocked out early. I still can't shake the feeling that I was not alone there. I wish I could explain it, but I can't. I keep thinking about those footsteps. The notes. That whisper. I don't work nights anymore. I can't. Whatever was in that hospital, it wasn't friendly. I don't know what it was, but I don't want to find out. I tried to forget about the hospital. I returned to a normal day shift, cleaning during the hours when the sun poured through the windows. It felt safer, but I couldn't shake the memories. The aisles still felt haunted, even in daylight. I hoped that by avoiding the night shifts, I'd left the strange occurrences behind. But my mind kept drifting back. I found myself replaying every moment: the footsteps, the whisper, the notes. I decided to confront the fear. I wanted answers. So, one night, after I got off work, I drove back to the hospital. It felt strange being there after hours, but I needed to see for myself. As I pulled into the parking lot, the place looked deserted. The only light came from the flickering bulbs hanging above the entrance. I hesitated but pressed on, my heartbeat quickening with each step. I pushed the door open, and the familiar scent of cleaning supplies hit me. It was a comfort, but it didn't last long. Walking through the almost silent corridors, I felt a sense of dread building inside me. I decided to head to the 3rd floor, where most of the strange experiences had happened. With each step, the darkness seemed to close in around me. I reminded myself it was just a hospital, but the shadows didn't agree. When I reached the third floor, I took a deep breath and swept my flashlight across the walls. Everything looked the same, yet I felt an electric tension in the air. I approached the supply closet that I'd discovered before. My heart raced as I opened the door, half expecting to find those notes again. What I found instead left me breathless. The closet was empty. Not a single bandage in sight. I scanned the room, thinking it had to be a mistake. But no, it was as if things had been wiped clean. The unease rolled over me like a wave, but I pressed on. I had to know. That's when I spotted something on the floor. A crumpled piece of paper caught in the corner by the wall. I reached down and picked it up, my hands trembling. I opened it slowly, feeling the air get colder around me as I read the words scrawled messily, "They're watching. Get out." Suddenly, the lights flickered above, and I spun around. The whispering returned, soft in the shadows. "Josh," it called again, closer this time. I felt a chill seep into my bones. I turned to run, heart pounding, but as I reached for the door, it slammed shut in front of me. The sound echoed in the emptiness. Panic surged through me. I looked back into the room, the shadows seemed to thicken, shapes dancing just beyond the edge of the light from my flashlight. It was no longer just my imagination. I wasn't alone. And then, a figure emerged from the dark, its eyes gleaming like sharp knives. I stumbled back. This was no ordinary hospital. I realized then, the truth was far worse than I had ever imagined. I had come searching for answers, but now I might never leave. I froze in place, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The figure was tall and thin, almost skeletal, and the eyes piercing and menacing seemed to bore right into me. My instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs felt like they were locked in concrete. "Josh," it whispered again, more insistent this time. It wasn't a voice I recognized, but it felt too familiar, like I'd heard it echoing in my nightmares. I turned toward the door, hoping to push it open, but it felt impossibly heavy against my grip. The darkness in the room shifted, moving closer as I desperately tugged at the knob. "Let me out!" I yelled, my voice trembling. I didn't want to turn around and face whatever was behind me. Part of me hoped it was just my imagination. But as the figure took a step forward, I knew I couldn't afford to look back. Finally, in a burst of adrenaline, I threw my shoulder against the door. It gave way with a loud creak, and I stumbled out into the hallway, gasping for air. My flashlight beam darted across the corridor, revealing shadows that wriggled and shifted, but nothing was there. I had to get away. I sprinted past the nurse's station, ignoring the scattered chairs and abandoned clipboards. I didn't stop until I reached the stairwell. I would take the stairs down to the first floor. It felt safer than being above ground. My pulse raced as I descended the stairs two at a time. But as I reached the landing for the second floor, the voice echoed again in the stillness, more haunting than before. "You can't escape, Josh." Panic surged, and I continued to move, not willing to pause for even a second. When I reached the first floor, I froze again for a moment. The main entrance was ahead, but I could hear something stirring behind me. I glanced over my shoulder, pulling the flashlight tight against my chest. Everything felt wrong. I had to get out. I pushed through the double doors at the entrance, bursting into the cool night air. My car was still parked in the lot, but just as I turned to run to it, something caught my eye. There, on the hospital's front steps, was another piece of paper. I hesitated, heart pounding. That feeling of being watched returned, prickling down my spine. I didn't want to go back inside, but I also felt drawn to that note. What if it was important? Steeling myself, I bent down and picked it up. The message was short, the handwriting almost frantic. "It sees you too." My breath hitched, and suddenly the shadows outside felt alive. I dashed to my car, jumping inside and locking the door. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking, and finally started the engine. As I drove away, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror. The hospital loomed behind me, its lights flickering ominously. The shadowy figure had vanished, but that whisper lingered in my ears. I knew I'd be back. There were more answers to be found, but I wasn't sure if I was ready for what I might uncover. This was just the beginning, and somehow, I couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The next day, I was a bundle of nerves. I barely slept after my encounter at the hospital. Every shadow in my apartment felt alive. I replayed the whispers over and over in my mind. It sees you too. What the hell did that mean? I had to return. I couldn't dismiss it as a bad dream. I grabbed my phone and texted my friend Mark. I needed someone with me when I went back. I felt stupid asking, but I had no choice. The thought of facing whatever was in that place alone terrified me. Mark replied quickly. Are you serious? After what happened last night? I know, but I need answers. Please. A few minutes later, he agreed to come. We decided to meet at the hospital in a few hours. I took deep breaths to steady myself. I was fearful, but I was also curious. There had to be a reason for the figure and the note. When I arrived back at the hospital, my heart raced. The pale exterior looked even creepier in the daylight. Mark was already waiting by the main entrance. He shot me a dubious look. Are you sure you want to go in? Yeah, I said, forcing confidence I didn't feel. We need to find out what's going on. We stepped inside, and the air felt heavy. The fluorescent lights flickered above, casting long shadows that seemed to twist around us. I led the way back toward the stairwell, where everything had begun to unravel. As we approached the second-floor landing, I heard a sudden noise behind us, a loud bang echoing through the empty hallway. I froze. Did you hear that? Mark nodded, his eyes wide. Yeah. What was that? Before I could respond, I spotted movement at the end of the hallway. A door seemed to be slightly ajar, swinging as if someone had just rushed through it. My instincts kicked in again. I didn't want to investigate, but I felt compelled to. Let's check it out, I said, reluctantly stepping forward. I pushed the door open a bit more and peeked inside. The room was dark and cluttered with old medical equipment. It felt abandoned, but part of me felt an overwhelming presence inside. I aimed the flashlight around but saw nothing unusual, just dust and dilapidated furniture. Suddenly, Mark gulped. Josh, look. He pointed to the wall. I turned the beam of light toward it and gasped. There were symbols drawn all over the walls, mad scribbles and markings, all centered around a haunting figure that looked like the one I saw last night. What the hell is this? I muttered, my heart thumping in my chest. Before I could process what I was seeing, I felt the temperature drop. A chill raced through the room. My breath fogged in the air, and then I heard the whisper again, low and menacing, you shouldn't have come back. The darkness seemed to thicken, and just then, the light flickered and went out. Mark and I were thrown into pitch blackness. Panic surged through me as I fumbled for my phone, desperate for any light. That's when I heard another noise, a shuffling sound, like something moving toward us. Josh. Mark's voice trembled. What do we do? I could feel the walls closing in, the fear wrapping around my throat. I needed a way out. But as I raised my phone, a shape loomed in the darkness, and everything froze. I couldn't breathe. Then I realized I wasn't alone anymore. I couldn't make out the shape clearly, but I could feel its presence. It felt heavy and suffocating, like a weight pressing down on my chest. My heart raced as I registered the fear in Mark's voice beside me. What is that? He whispered, panic rising with every second. I forced my hand to steady as I illuminated the screen of my phone. The glow pushed back the darkness just enough for me to see. That's when the shadow began to shift. I stumbled back, almost into Mark, as the figure became more defined. It resembled the sketch on the wall, fingers too long, eyes that glinted like shards of glass. My instincts screamed at me to run, but I was frozen. "Let us get out of here," I finally gasped, looking at Mark. He nodded, still wide-eyed, and we both turned to the door. Yet before we could take a step, the door slammed shut. The sound was deafening, ricocheting off the walls of the dim room. We whipped around, dread pooling in my stomach. A whisper, clearer and more urgent this time, filled the air. "Stay with me, Josh." Mark shouted, panic threading through his words. "We have to go now." I reached for the doorknob, but my fingers were trembling too much to grip it. A low, guttural laugh echoed around us, wrapping around us like a thick fog. I turned back toward the figure, who now stood closer, and I felt like I was being pulled into its gaze. "What do you want?" I croaked. The figure tilted its head, almost curiously, and then it took a step forward. I could see the textures of its skin, gray and mottled like peeling wallpaper. I felt the urge to scream, but my voice caught. Mark's hand found my arm, and he tugged me back. "Josh! Now!" That snapped me out of the trance. I threw my weight against the door, my shoulder slamming against it. The wood groaned, but it didn't budge. The figure was closer now, and I could feel its breath, a chilling breeze brushing against my face. "Please don't hurt us," I shouted, desperation pouring from my voice. I feared I had crossed some line, invading a sacred space. Maybe that scribbling on the wall was a warning. In response, the room grew colder still. I could see our breath mingling in the cold air like smoke. I pounded on the door, wild and frantic. "Help us!" But nobody answered. And just as suddenly as it had begun, the whispers stopped. Silence smothered the space, and I felt a shift of flickering hope that the figure had retreated. I dared a glance over my shoulder. The shadow was gone. "Josh, we're getting out of here," Mark insisted, his grip tightening around my arm. I nodded. Finally, with all my strength, I pushed against the door again. This time, it cracked open just enough for us to slip through. We bolted into the hallway, gasping for breath. My heart hammered in my chest as the sound of our footsteps echoed through the emptiness. I didn't dare look back. The weight of the hospital pressed down on me, thick and oppressive. I turned to Mark. "What the hell was that?" My voice wavered. "I don't know, but I don't want to find out," he replied, his face pale. We hurried back through the empty corridors, trying to escape that oppressive atmosphere. As we reached the exit and stumbled outside, I felt a strange compulsion to look back. That's when I saw it again. There, in one of the upper windows, was a figure watching us. It was just a silhouette, but it felt like the same thing I had seen in the room. I shivered. It was still following me. And I knew this wasn't over. The cool night air hit me as we rushed out of the building. I took a deep breath, hoping it would clear my mind, but the taste of dread lingered. "Did you see it?" I asked Mark, still shaken. "Yeah," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What if it comes after us?" "We need to get to my car," I replied. My legs felt like they were moving through molasses, weighed down by adrenaline and fear. Every shadow seemed to twist and turn, mocking my every step. We sprinted toward the parking lot, glancing over our shoulders. I was certain I'd catch a glimpse of it, that gray figure lurking around the corner, but nothing followed us. For that moment, I managed to ignore the knots in my stomach. As we neared my car, a flicker of calm washed over me. But Mark's next words brought it crashing down. "Wait, Josh. Did you lock your door?" I stopped dead in my tracks. The tension returned. I fumbled with my keys, dreading what I might find. I think so," I swung open the door and let out a shaky breath when I saw the interior untouched, but the sense of safety didn't last. "Get in." I waved Mark inside as I glanced back once more at the hospital. It loomed like a giant, dark shadow. Mark quickly jumped in, and I locked the door. Still, my eyes kept darting to the hospital. I turned the ignition, relief briefly rising as the engine rumbled to life. But the moment we began to pull away, something caught my attention. A flash of movement, just outside the glass. I froze. What was that? "I don't know, don't look," Mark urged, gripping my arm. My pulse quickened again. I had to look. I couldn't help myself. I craned my neck to the side and saw a fleeting glimpse of the figure, low to the ground, darting past one of the flickering lampposts. "Did you see? It chased us," I exclaimed. Panic bubbled in my voice. "Just drive," Mark shouted, and I pressed the gas pedal hard, the tires screeching as we took off. The car bounced over the cracked pavement, and I could feel Mark's fear mixing with mine, intertwining as we sped further away. We drove in silence for several minutes, hearts racing, only the sound of the engine filling the void. Finally, I spoke. "What do we do now?" Mark leaned against the window, staring blankly into the night. "We can't go back there, Josh. We need to tell someone." I nodded, urgency pooling again. "But who would believe us?" Before Mark could respond, my phone buzzed violently in my pocket. I pulled it out, the screen lighting up with an unfamiliar number. A knot formed in my stomach. I answered despite the warning playing in my head. "Hello?" A raspy voice whispered on the other end, jagged and familiar, "You shouldn't have left, Josh." I'm still here. My blood ran cold. "Who is this?" I demanded, my voice shaking. But the line went dead. The silence that followed was heavier than before, a darkness that smothered the car's interior. Mark and I exchanged fearful looks. Then, my phone buzzed again, and I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was watching us wasn't done yet. I snapped the phone shut, my heart racing. "That was creepy," I said, fumbling with the device in my hands. The sensation of being watched was creeping back, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in the air between us. Mark sat up straight, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean by, still here? What did that voice mean?" "I don't know," I replied, stifling a nervous laugh. "But we need to figure this out before we go insane." He nodded but didn't look convinced. A thick silence filled the car, punctuated only by the hum of the engine. I took a deep breath, trying to focus on the road ahead. My mind raced. I thought about the figure. The unpleasant, gnawing sensation returned, entwined with a chill that danced along my spine. "Let us go to the diner," I suggested. The late-night spot had always offered a sense of security, a regular heartbeat in the chaos. "We can talk to someone." "Yeah," Mark replied, his voice still shaky. "But what if it follows us there?" I didn't want to entertain that thought. I tightened my grip on the wheel, forcing myself to concentrate. The diner was just a few blocks away, and I pushed the accelerator a bit harder, desperate to reach a place that felt safe. When we pulled into the parking lot, the neon lights buzzed overhead, casting a warm glow that felt like a lifeline. I parked, but just as I turned off the engine, Mark pointed. "Look, Josh." I followed his gaze and froze. Outside the diner stood a figure, faintly illuminated by the lights. It was too far to make out any details, but I could feel its intensity even from a distance. The same unsettling feeling swept over me. "What the hell? Are you going to get out?" Mark asked, panic rising in his voice. I hesitated, staring at the figure, which didn't seem to move. "I mean, what if it's the same thing? Maybe it's just someone else?" Mark suggested, doubt creeping into his tone, but I could hear the urgency behind his words. Maybe, I murmured, but I knew we had to find out. Gathering my courage, I swung the door open. "Wait, Josh," Mark called, reaching for my arm. I took a step out, squinting in the fluorescent light. The figure remained still, a shadow against the diner's bright backdrop. I heard the soft jingle of the diner bell as I approached. The hairs on my neck stood up. "Hey!" I shouted, trying to sound bold but failing when my voice cracked. "What do you want?" No response. The figure didn't budge, but I could feel the tension coiling in my chest. Just when I thought I'd turn back, the figure stepped forward, revealing a face. It looked familiar. "Josh?" the newcomer said, a touch of disbelief lacing his voice. My breath caught in my throat. "Tyler?" It was a face I hadn't seen in years, a friend from my college days who had vanished off the radar after an accident. "What are you doing here?" But the question had just spilled out of my mouth when I realized something important. Tyler shouldn't have been in this town. He wasn't supposed to be alive. Before I could process the implications, he took a step closer, his expression shifting from hesitation to something darker. "You shouldn't be here, Josh." Then everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, the diner's fluorescent lights flickered back to life. I was on the floor, Mark kneeling beside me, his face pale and panicked. "Josh! Are you okay?" I slowly pushed myself up, shaking off confusion. "What happened?" "You just blacked out," he said, glancing nervously at the entrance. "That guy Tyler, he just disappeared." I blinked, memory swirling in my mind like fog. Tyler had been standing there, telling me not to be here, and then nothing. "Where did he go?" I asked, dizzy. Mark shook his head. "I don't know. 1 minute he was here, and then he just wasn't. Like he melted into the darkness." My heart raced as I recalled the intensity in Tyler's eyes, the urgency in his warning. What if he's trying to tell us something? What if we're in danger? Mark exhaled sharply. "Then we need to leave. Now." I climbed to my feet, still feeling unsteady. The diner was unnaturally quiet now, the patrons who had been around mere moments ago seemingly vanished. I turned to the exit, but something snagged my attention. On one of the tables, a barely touched cup of coffee slowly steamed in the air. There was no one around, but the warmth of the cup seemed freshly brewed. "Josh!" Mark urged, his voice cutting through my stunned silence. "Let us go." I pulled away from the table, my heart pounding as we hurried toward the door. But the feeling returned, the prickling sensation of being watched. The early morning air hit my face like an icy slap, and I glanced around the empty parking lot. Where was everybody? As I stepped outside, the sound of a bell chiming made me pause. It was the diner door closing behind us, but it felt like a finality I wasn't ready for. "Where do we go now?" My voice trembled. "Let us head back to my place," Mark suggested, glancing over his shoulder. His eyes darted back toward the diner's entrance, as if expecting to see Tyler reappear. I could sense his anxiety, it matched my own. I nodded, but deep down, I felt a pull to investigate further. "Maybe we should check back inside," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop myself. "Are you crazy?" "No way," Mark responded, his panic mounting. I could see he was struggling to hold on to his composure. "Stay here then," I said impulsively, already turning back to the door. "I need to know what's happening." As I stepped inside, the air thickened around me, almost tangible. The diner felt even emptier than before. The booths loomed like old sentinels waiting for the inevitable. Something glinted on the floor near the counter. It shimmered in the dim light, drawing me closer. I kneeled down, my heart racing. It was a small silver locket, half buried in the carpet fibers. I picked it up, feeling its cool weight in my hand, but as I turned it over, I gasped. Inside was a picture of Tyler, the same Tyler I thought I knew. But there was something else, too. Underneath the photograph, a note fell to the floor, its edges ragged. I picked it up with shaking hands and read the words scrawled across it, "Don't trust the shadows." Suddenly, the lights flickered again, and a cold breeze swept through the diner. I spun around as the shadows deepened, coiling in the corners like they were alive. Then I heard it, a whisper, soft yet insistent, "Help me." Another voice joined. "You shouldn't have come back." Panic surged through me. I backed away, locket clutched tight in my hand, the shadows closing in around me. I knew then that whatever was happening wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I stumbled back in shock, my heart hammering against my ribcage. The whispers intensified, echoing off the diner's walls. I could almost feel the shadows reaching for me, curling around my ankles like vines. A jolt of fear shot through me. I needed to get out. As I turned to flee, the door slammed shut with a bang that seemed to shake the very foundation of the diner. I rushed toward it, pulling at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Panic bubbled up inside me. "Mark!" I shouted, desperate for his voice outside. Suddenly, the whispers stopped. The silence that followed was even more unnerving. My breath came out in quick gasps as I pressed my ear to the door, listening for any hint of him. But nothing came. I spun around, clutching the locket like a talisman. The diner seemed darker, the shadows alive with a sinister energy. That's when I noticed something moving in the corner. A figure, real or imagined, I couldn't tell, shifted in the dim light. It was a woman, her features obscured. "Help me," she echoed, the sound dripping with desperation. I took a cautious step toward her, heart racing. "Who are you?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm trapped," she said, her voice cracking. "You need to leave." Before she could finish, the flickering lights blinked out completely, plunging the diner into darkness. My instincts kicked in, and I reached for my phone, the screen illuminating my trembling hands. I swung the light around, searching for her, but she had vanished. "Mark!" I called again, frustration clawing at me. I could feel the shadows growing heavier, suffocating, closing in on my mind and body. In a panic, I dashed back to the booth where I'd found the locket. I needed something, anything to reassure me I wasn't losing my mind. My fingers fumbled around, and I flipped over the table. Underneath, I found an old, cracked notebook, its pages yellowed with age. I ripped it free and began to flip through it. Scribbled notes filled the pages, mentions of disappearances, strange sightings, and eerie encounters. My eyes widened as I stumbled across a passage that made my blood run cold. "They come at night, calling for help. But learn to listen closely, the shadows hold their secrets." I felt a prick in my mind as if something was unraveling. Without thinking, I tore out the page and shoved it into my pocket. I had to find Mark. I didn't know how much time I had left. Back at the door, my pulse raced. With all my strength, I grasped the handle. "Mark!" I shouted one last time, injecting all my fear into my voice. Finally, there was a thud, and the door creaked open. Mark stood there, his face pale with worry. I darted past him into the parking lot, the night air like a bomb against my frantic thoughts. "What happened in there?" he asked, grabbing my arm. I didn't answer right away. I was still processing the woman's face, the whispers and the shadows. As I turned my gaze back toward the diner, I froze. The window I had just looked out of now showed my own reflection, but beyond it, the shadows slithered like spirits come to life. And out of the darkness came the woman again, the same pleading eyes staring at me. Before I could grasp what was happening, she mouthed a single word: "Run." My blood turned to ice. I didn't need telling twice. I pulled Mark along, heart pounding with urgency. Whatever was happening wasn't just a mystery, it was a threat that felt all too real. And something deep inside me knew that more was to come, lurking just out of sight. We ran through the parking lot, the sound of our footsteps echoing against the asphalt. I felt like I was being chased, that something unseen was right behind us, pulling on my shirt, tugging at my mind, desperate to keep me from escaping. Mark and I didn't stop to catch our breath until we reached the other end of the lot, out of sight of the diner. What was that? His eyes were wide, still reflecting the panic of minutes ago. What just happened? I glanced back over my shoulder, half expecting to see the figure of the woman or something worse. But the diner was just a building, quiet, unassuming, as if nothing had ever happened. I don't know, I said, my voice shaky, but I don't want to find out. We reached my car, and although a part of me wanted to jump in the front seat and speed away, my instincts told me to stay alert. I didn't trust the night or what waited in those shadows. We should get out of here, I urged, fumbling for my keys. But Mark's gaze kept darting back to the diner. There has to be an explanation for everything. Maybe it's just some weird coincidence. As he spoke, I noticed the atmosphere shift, like the air itself wavered with tension. The wind picked up slightly, carrying a murmuring sound that seeped through the quiet night. My stomach tightened. You really think that? I rolled my eyes in disbelief, but the uneasiness lingered. You think Tyler was just passing through and we both somehow went crazy at the same time? I just mean, he hesitated, chewing his lip, there was that notebook you found. What if there's a rational reason for all of this? I scoffed softly, shaking my head. You think a notebook filled with disappearances makes sense? We're not in some kind of movie. This is real. And whatever is happening, it's connected. Mark stepped back slightly, rating the distance, the brightness from my headlights illuminating his unease. But my words caught in my throat as I caught movement from the corner of my eye. A shadow flickered by the diner's window, a face, a silhouette. It struck a familiar chord. It was her, the woman who warned us. Did you see that? I gasped. See what? He asked, brows knitting together. Just I turned, but the figure was gone. The darkness around us was absolute, the diner now just a shape illuminated dimly against the night. Josh, let us go. Mark was pulling me towards the car, fear glimmering in his gaze. Let us just get out of here. But something held me back. That feeling of unease lingered, something between the heavy silence and the distant echoes of the diner kept me rooted in place, suspending me from the urge to escape. I need to know what happened in there, I said, the words leaving my mouth almost against my will. With a hesitant nod, Mark followed as I pulled open the driver's door. We climbed inside, but just as I turned the key in the ignition, the car lights momentarily flickered. I glanced in the rearview mirror, dread pooling deep in my stomach. The woman was there again, faint, almost translucent, standing on the sidewalk with her mouth moving as if she were speaking. Help me. The words silently echoed in my mind. Go. Go. Mark shouted again, panic coursing through him as he slammed his palms against the dashboard. The sound jolted me back to reality. I shoved the transmission into reverse and floored the gas. The tires screeched against the pavement as we peeled away. I didn't look back until we hit the main road, the diner fading into the darkness behind us. Thank God, Mark sighed, anxiety etched onto his features, but I noticed the faintest flicker of doubt lurking in his eyes. What if we just left those people behind? I wondered aloud, even as dread tightened its grip on my heart. What if Tyler needs help? Tyler isn't real, Mark snapped, the weight of fear unleashing into anger. No one can help anyone. Look at what we're dealing with. Whatever ghosts are in that diner, they're not ours to save. I have to find out, I replied, the desperation in my voice betraying me. But Mark shot me a dark look. You refuse to understand, stepping back in there puts us at risk. We could end up part of those notes. The word struck a chord, my mind spiraled back to the notebook, warning us of the darkness. We can't just run. We have to, but my thought was interrupted, the familiar whisper breaking through the silence now. You shouldn't be running. Mark's eyes widened in terror. No. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, desperately trying to move forward, but the road felt dangerously unstable. The whispers echoed louder, filling the space with an eerie chorus, taunting us. Ahead, the shadows of the trees lining the road began to distort, twisting and growing, as though they were alive. I slammed the accelerator to escape whatever was lurking behind us, but my heart knew this wouldn't end with distance alone. Let us just figure this out together, I pleaded, voice trembling as I fought the fear creeping in. What if there's a way to stop this? Stop what? He snapped again, but this time, real uncertainty shadowed his tone. What are we even fighting against? Before I could answer, a figure appeared right on the road ahead, blocking the path, features disintegrating into the dark just like the diner, hauntingly familiar. My heart dropped. No, no, no. I pressed the brakes hard, skidding to a halt a mere breath away from it. The silhouette stepped forward, its essence melding with the night, and once more, the whisper escaped its lips, "Help me." I gripped the wheel, breath hitching in my throat. What do you want? I shouted into the silence. But the figure only stood there, its eyes glinting like shards of ice, still waiting for an answer that I wasn't sure I could give. In that moment, lost between fear and resolve, I knew I was woven into a thread of complexity much deeper than I understood, and whatever mysteries lay ahead would demand more than just courage. With a final glance at Mark, I understood the road had twisted into danger, but the only way forward was still veiled in shadows. "Please, we need to help," was all I managed to say, and suddenly, the figure vanished. That hollow silence felt like the prelude to an unfolding darkness that waited to claim us both. But as the headlights flickered once more, I knew one thing for certain: we were far from safe, and whatever lingered behind would not let go. Not yet. Not until the last question was answered.